The kestrel dawn groaned under the weight of its own silence. Lights flickered, the recycled air tasted like rust, and the only thing louder than the emergency klaxons was the creeping dread gnawing at everyone's nerves. Captain Radenholt stood at the center of the command deck, fists clenched against the console. The bridge crew looked to him, silently begging for orders, for a miracle, for something other than the cold void of dying systems and false hope. "We've sent out the distress signal," muttered Brooks, the communications officer. His voice cracked. "If anyone's out there?" Raiden didn't respond. He was watching the black of space through the shattered forward display, where the stars barely blinked anymore. The anomaly had hit them hard. No warning, no aggression, no reason. Just a sudden collapse in systems and a spreading pulse that shut them down like dominoes. "Keep the signal running on all channels," Raiden finally said, voice hoarse. "We hold until we hear something, anything." They had maybe 30 hours of oxygen left. Less if the CO2 scrubbers gave up completely. Half the ship was depressurized. They'd lost over 20 crew. Raiden had ordered the forward section sealed, but he could still hear the screams in his head, the ones that didn't make it through the hatches. The Kestrel Dawn had gone into uncharted space on a survey mission, not a damn war. They were explorers, not soldiers. "Sir." Brooks stood up suddenly. I don't think we're alone." Raiden turned just in time to see it. A man, no, a figure, stood at the center of the deck. He hadn't come through the door. No shimmer of a teleport. No sound. 1 second the space was empty. The next, he was simply there. His skin was pale, almost translucent. Dressed in a sleek robe that didn't catch the light so much as drink it. And his eyes, black, bottomless, like the gravity of a dying star. "Who the hell?" Raiden started, hand reaching for his sidearm. The figure raised one hand lazily, not threatening, just still. "That won't help," he said calmly. The crew froze. "Who are you?" Raiden demanded. "I am what answers when humanity calls for help," the figure said. "Only this time, help is not what you deserve." Brooks whispered, "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Raiden didn't take his eyes off the stranger. "If you didn't come to help us, then what are you?" "Judgment," the figure said, voice echoing in a way that didn't make sense, like it wasn't coming from his mouth, but from every wall and wire of the ship. Raiden took a breath. "We didn't cause this. We don't even know what we hid out there." The figure stepped forward slowly, robes whispering like dead leaves. "What you hit was a warning. This part of space was sealed for a reason, not by weapons, by silence. And you, like always, couldn't resist poking what you didn't understand." "We're explorers," Raiden said. "Not invaders. You say that every time," the figure replied coldly. "You colonize, you dig, you extract, you spread. That is your nature. That is your sin. We're trying to learn. We've made mistakes, yeah, but we're building alliances. We've signed treaties. You sign with one hand while taking with the other." Suddenly, the ship powered up. Lights returned, consoles rebooted, systems flickered back to life, like someone flipped a galactic switch. The crew gasped. Brooks swore. Raiden didn't move. "You brought us back online," he said quietly. "Why?" "To give you time," the figure answered. "This is a warning, the last you'll ever get." "And if we don't change?" Raiden asked, his voice steady. The figure smiled faintly, not with kindness, but like someone watching the inevitable unfold. "Then the next time the stars hear your distress signal, they won't send someone like me. They'll send something final." The lights flickered again, and the figure vanished as silently as he'd come. No breach, no exit, just gone. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Raiden turned to Brooks. "Get Earth Command on the line. Priority 1. Brooks hesitated. "Sir, they'll think we're crazy." "Yeah," Raiden said, voice low. But they need to hear this, because crazy or not, he's not wrong. The hum of the ship's systems returning to life was supposed to be comforting, but it wasn't. Not for Raiden. Not for any of the crew. Everything worked again. Life support stabilized, communications cleared, even the navigational systems, which had been utterly fried, were miraculously restored, as if the anomaly had never happened. And that's what made it worse. It was too perfect. Brooks sat hunched over the console, trying to get a secure link to Earth Command. We're back in network range, but there's interference. It's like something's piggybacking our transmission. Raiden stood behind him, arms folded tightly across his chest. Keep pushing. Use the emergency override channels. Aye, sir. The rest of the bridge was silent. No chatter, no idle jokes, just wide eyes and stiff backs. They all saw what he saw. A figure who walked through space like it was his backyard. A voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. A message that cut deeper than any enemy attack could. Judgment. Raiden wasn't religious, not in the way some of the old-timers were. He believed in reason, in human progress, in the grit that had pulled them from Earth's dirt to the stars. But whatever that thing was, it wasn't just alien, it was something older, something that didn't see humans as a threat, but as a problem. Got it, Brooks said, jolting him back. Patch established. Earth Command is on the line. They're waiting. Raiden nodded. Routed to my station. The screen flickered, and the face of Admiral Kyra Delane appeared. Gray hair tight against her head, eyes sharp enough to slice metal. Captain Holt, she said curtly, you've been off-grid for 5 days. What happened out there? He didn't waste time. We encountered an anomaly. We lost multiple crew. Systems were completely disabled. We sent a distress signal. We received it, she said, but the data was corrupted. Glitchy. Fragmented. No coordinates. We've had recon ships scouring 3 sectors. Raiden leaned forward. You won't find anything. The signal didn't go to you first. Delane narrowed her eyes. Explain. He did. He told her everything. About the sudden collapse, the power loss, the deaths. Then he described the figure, the message, the threat. He expected her to laugh, to accuse him of stress-induced hallucinations. But instead, she was silent. When she spoke, her voice was low. We've had similar reports. Raiden froze. What? Delane's jaw clenched. 2 ships, both deep exploration vessels, both encountered unexplained power shutdowns. One never came back. The other reported a being, described almost exactly as you did. And then, they disappeared. The word settled over Raiden like a lead weight. You're saying we're not the first? Number, and I doubt you'll be the last. He sat back, stunned. Why wasn't this shared with the fleet? Because we didn't believe them, she admitted. Now we might have to. Brooks turned pale. Ma'am, with all due respect, what do we do? Delane looked directly at Raiden. You said it gave us a chance, a warning. If that's true, then you need to figure out what exactly we've done to deserve this. Dig through the data. Find out what you triggered. Raiden nodded slowly. Understood. Delane's screen blinked out. Silence returned. He turned to the crew. I want all logs reviewed. Navigation paths, atmospheric readings, anomaly records. Something out here marked us. Something ancient. We need to know why. Hours passed. The crew worked like men and women possessed, combing through everything. Then Zhen, the science officer, called out from the analysis bay. Captain, you need to see this. Raiden rushed over, leaning over her shoulder. It's not just an anomaly, she said, pointing at the readouts. It's a signature, a pattern, a kind of quantum residue left behind. Left behind by what? She looked up at him, her face pale. A warning beacon. It wasn't random. It was designed to detect human energy outputs, specifically colonial terraforming emissions. Raiden's blood ran cold. We tripped a goddamn interstellar tripwire. Jen nodded. And it broadcast our presence. To who? He asked, already knowing the answer. She didn't respond. Raiden stood upright, the weight of the truth settling in. They hadn't just wandered into forbidden space. They'd announced their presence, and someone, something, answered. The mood aboard the Kestrel Dawn shifted from fear to a grim sort of clarity. It was one thing to suffer a systems failure. It was another to realize they had stumbled into a minefield humanity was never meant to cross. Captain Raiden Holt stood in the center of the analysis bay, staring at the holographic projection of the anomaly's readings. No longer just data, but a message, a tripwire, a warning that they had stomped straight through. Jen kept her voice steady, but her hands trembled as she pointed at a section of the readout. The beacon wasn't just broadcasting our presence. It was cataloging our systems, mapping our energy emissions, profiling our tech, us. It scanned every signature unique to human design. Almost like it was verifying who we were, Raiden muttered. Exactly, she replied. And then it answered with a response matched to us. That thing, whatever it was, knew everything about us the moment it arrived. Raiden rubbed his jaw, mind racing. So it wasn't chance, it wasn't coincidence. This judgment was deliberate. Personal Brooks stepped in, holding a fresh report. Sir, I cross-referenced the last known trajectory of the beacon's pulse. It didn't stop here. After lighting up on our position, it continued outward, fast, like it was relaying information. To where? Brooks hesitated. Unknown. But it's beyond human-charted space, beyond even the furthest fringe colonies. Raiden looked back at the projection. Then someone else out there knows we exist, and they didn't before. Jen added, this wasn't just a warning. It was a decision point. Someone is watching to see what we do next. Raiden's fists clenched. It was never about the ship. It was about all of humanity. A test. And he had the sick feeling Earth wasn't going to like the results. He stepped out of the bay and into the corridor. The hum of restored systems should have brought relief, but now it just felt artificial. Like being given your life back only so someone could see what you'd do with it, like a mouse in a maze. He found himself in the medical bay next. Half the beds were empty, burned out in the systems crash. The other half held injured crew. Men and women who hadn't signed up to be pawns in some intergalactic moral judgment. He nodded to the medtech, who gave him a grim nod back. Raiden moved to the far end, where Second Engineer Callis was hooked up to a bypass ventilator. She'd been on the outer maintenance ring when the anomaly hit, caught in the decompression surge. Her lungs were damaged, but she was conscious now, barely. She lifted a weak hand when she saw him. Captain, she rasped. Don't speak, Raiden said softly, pulling a chair beside her bed. She chuckled faintly. Too late. I've been listening. Listening to what? To the crew, she whispered. They're scared. Not of dying, but of being seen for what we really are. He looked at her, puzzled. I used to believe, Callis continued, her voice low, that we were the good guys, bringing civilization to the stars. But out here, such we're not bringing light. We're just dragging our shadows with us. Raiden swallowed hard. There was nothing to say to that, because deep down, he'd wondered the same. Before he could respond, the intercom clicked on. Captain Holt to the bridge. Priority signal detected. Non-human origin. Raiden stood instantly. Stay with her, he told the medtech, and ran. When he reached the bridge, the forward display was already glowing with unfamiliar symbols. Not human. Not from any known alliance. They were simple, clean, deliberate. What is that? Raiden demanded. Brooks shook his head. It just started broadcasting. We're running it through the xenolinguistics filters. The computer translated the message seconds later. Observation complete. Evaluation under review. Raiden's mouth went dry. Jen looked over from her station. Sir, if they're reviewing us, it means there's more than one of them. A council, a governing body, maybe. Brooks added quietly, and if there's a review, there's going to be a verdict. The message blinked away. Silence. Then a new message appeared. The judgment will be delivered in 7 rotations. Jen gasped. That's 7 Earth days. No, Raiden said slowly. That's 7 chances. Every ship, every colony, every transmission we send. It's all being watched now, evaluated. He turned toward the crew, voice heavy. We just became humanity's representatives. This ship, United States. Everything we say, do, or don't do, they're watching. And in 7 days, we find out if we live, or if we burn. 7 days. It sounded like plenty, until you realized that every second ticking by wasn't just time lost, but evidence gathered. Every movement on the Kestrel Dawn, every word spoken, every conflict or gesture of compassion was part of a cosmic scale, now tilting one way or the other. Humanity's fate wasn't in the hands of politicians or generals. It was in his, Captain Raiden Holt, a man who once believed his job was to navigate the stars, not carry the weight of an entire species on his shoulders. The ship was operational, but the crew wasn't the same. Sleep came in broken fragments. Conversations turned quiet, careful. No one yelled. No one cursed. It was like they were being recorded, because they were. Jen confirmed it within hours of the message. There's a low-band radiation signature following our power core, she said, pulling up the data overlay. It's transmitting in bursts, encrypted alien, uncrackable for now, but it's definitely watching. Brooks leaned against the console, jaw tight. So we're a living courtroom now. No, Raiden said flatly. We're the exhibit. They tried to go about their duties, but everything felt staged. Every decision Raiden made was now layered with doubt. Was this the right thing for his crew? Or was he just trying to impress some invisible judge? When a fight broke out between 2 junior engineers over rations, normal, everyday tension, he had to separate them personally. Normally, he'd have written them up, issued discipline. Instead, he sat them both down in the mess and said nothing. Just watched them. Let the silence chew at them until one broke down, apologizing, near tears. The other followed. A genuine moment, a human moment. Raiden left it unpunished. Later, Brooks cornered him. You think they're watching for empathy? I think they're watching for anything that makes us worth keeping around, Raiden said. The 3rd day brought something different. A transmission came through, not alien, human, from a mining vessel out near the Deltos Drift. They'd received the same message, worded differently, but unmistakably the same meaning. You are being evaluated. Other ships were waking up to the same truth, and they were panicking. Earth Command is suppressing the leaks, Brooks said, reading the stream off his console. But it's spreading through back channels and dark fleet networks. Some captains are grounding their ships, others are trying to flee. A few are broadcasting appeals, begging forgiveness. Raiden exhaled slowly. We can't run from this. No, but others are going to try. And if they mess it up... He didn't have to finish the sentence. They weren't just being judged individually. Humanity was being judged collectively. If one ship fired on an alien outpost, if one colony wiped out a native ecosystem for minerals, if one AI slaughtered a rebellion, all of them would wear the cost. That night, Raiden stood alone in the observatory deck, staring out at the stars. The room was dim, the glass tinted to block out radiation from a nearby pulsar. It looked peaceful, like nothing in the galaxy could be wrong. But peace, he realized, was just the thin ice over chaos. Jen found him there, hours later. She didn't speak at first. Then she asked, "Do you think we're worth saving?" Raiden didn't answer right away. He was thinking of Earth, the forests he left behind, the cities choking on ambition, the kindness of strangers and the cruelty of systems. He thought of his childhood, raised in the Martian domes, where he learned early that power didn't always belong to the wise. He thought of the war he'd fought in, and the refugee he once gave his rations to. The tears, the thanks. "Sometimes," he finally said, "sometimes I think we are." Jen nodded. "I think they want to believe that too, whoever they are. I don't think they want to destroy us. I think they're giving us a chance to tell them why they shouldn't." Raiden looked at her, and for the first time since the encounter, there was a sliver of resolve in his eyes. "Then we better make the damn case." By the 5th day, the pressure was a living thing. The Kestrel Dawn had become more than a ship. It was a symbol, a test case. And everyone on board felt it pressing down like gravity. Every system they repaired, every argument diffused, every compassionate act. It was all part of a bigger picture being painted for unseen eyes. Raiden Holt wasn't just a captain anymore. He was the reluctant face of a species standing trial. Reports were now coming in from across human space. Quiet ones, relayed through encrypted back doors and whispered comms between ships that didn't want Earth Command listening. The same pattern. Ships disabled, brief encounters with the figure, or a version of him, and the same message. Observation, evaluation, judgment. Some ships vanished after the 7th day. No wreckage, no final signals, just gone. And those that remained, well, they started changing. One freighter in the Cerix belt halted its mining operations entirely, refusing to strip another asteroid until they received new ecological clearance. A warship near the Valari cluster lowered its weapons permanently and broadcast a peace beacon to nearby alien colonies. On a prison transport, the warden released half the inmates, non-violent offenders, with nothing but a warning. "This is your second chance." Brooks sat in the corner of the briefing room, rubbing his temples. "We're rewriting our species just to stay alive." "No," Raiden said quietly. "We're being reminded of what we should have been all along." It wasn't performative anymore. Not for Raiden. Not for the crew. It felt like they were peeling off something. A hardened shell of arrogance, greed, and indifference that had grown thick over generations of unchecked expansion. And what was left underneath? It wasn't perfect, but it was human. Still, the countdown pressed on. That morning, something changed. "Captain," Jen called out urgently from the science station, "you need to see this." He moved quickly. The forward display had shifted. No more evaluation messages. No more cryptic warnings. Just coordinates. "New anomaly?" he asked. Jen nodded. "Approximately 1.2 light-years out, but this one's different. It's stable, structured, almost artificial. Is it calling us? I think it's inviting us." Raiden made his decision quickly. "Plot a course. We go now." Brooks hesitated. "Sir, what if it's a trap?" "If it is," Raiden said, "then maybe that's the judgment. But if they're giving us a chance to speak directly, we go." The crew moved fast. For the first time since the incident, there was a kind of purpose in their stride that wasn't just survival. They weren't hiding anymore. They were responding. It took just under 9 hours at maximum warp to reach the coordinates. What they found didn't look like a ship or a station. It was more like a monument, hanging motionless in the void. It was massive, spherical, metallic, wrapped in concentric rings that pulsed with a soft, blue glow. Not hostile, not welcoming. Just watching. Raiden stood at the observation window, staring at it. "What the hell is that?" Jen's voice was hushed. "A judgment chamber." As if on cue, the ship's systems flickered. But this time there was no shutdown. Instead, a voice filled the bridge. Calm, low, emotionless. "Captain Raiden Holt, you have chosen to stand." The crew froze. "Your vessel has been designated as the representative of your species. You may speak, you may offer proof, you may offer nothing. But you must choose." Raiden took a breath. "Who are you?" he asked aloud, though he knew they wouldn't answer that part. There was silence then. "We are the measure. You are the consequence." Brooks whispered, "Captain, what do we even say to that?" Raiden stepped forward. He knew what he had to do. "I want to speak for humanity," he said. "Not as a leader, not as a hero, just as a man who knows what it means to fail and try again." The voice replied instantly. "Then prepare your testimony. You have one rotation. After that, the verdict will fall." The connection cut. The crew sat in stunned silence. Raiden looked around at them, the weight of everything on his shoulders, but also something else burning in his chest. Fire. Resolve. "We have one day," he said, "to write our answer. Not for them, but for us." The air on the Kestrel dawn was thick with silence. One day. That's all they had to speak on behalf of humanity. A single rotation to convince an unknown, omniscient force that their species deserved to continue existing. Captain Raiden Holt stood alone in the command deck for a long time after the message ended, staring at the alien monument hanging in space before them. It didn't pulse or move or threaten, it simply waited. He could feel it watching. And maybe that was the worst part of all. He didn't sleep that night. Neither did most of the crew. Some prayed, others wrote letters they might never send. Brooks spent hours reading Earth's oldest philosophical texts, muttering quotes to himself. Jen stayed in the analysis lab, trying to understand the structure of the sphere, as if knowing what it was made of would change the fact that it held humanity's future in its unblinking gaze. Raiden, though, sat in the observation deck with an old digital recorder. It was obsolete tech, an antique from the early days of deep space travel. But somehow it felt more honest than transmitting his message through the sterile channels of the ship's AI. He held the device in his palm and stared into the stars. Then he spoke. "My name is Raiden Holt. I was born on Mars. I've never been to Earth, but I've studied it all my life. The rivers, the trees, the ruined cities, the wars, the art, the endless contradictions. Maybe that's where I'll start." He paused. "I don't know what you want to hear. I don't have a speech full of justifications. I won't pretend we've been good stewards of the galaxy. We haven't. We've been arrogant, reckless. We take too much. We learn too slowly. We often only change when we're cornered." Another pause. "But we can change." He looked down at the recorder. "I've seen it. In my crew, in myself. We build weapons, but we also build homes. We destroy, but we mourn our dead. We've crossed lines we should have never touched, and then we spent decades trying to clean the blood from our hands. Not because we were told to, because it hurt us. Because somewhere, buried deep beneath our noise and selfishness, we still care." His voice thickened. He wasn't reading anything. This was from memory, from truth. "I've watched a man risk his life to save an alien child on a mining moon. I've seen scientists give up fortunes to stop a planet from burning. I've seen entire colonies starve rather than take food stolen from the weak." His hand clenched the recorder tighter. "You said we were being judged, so here's my confession. We don't deserve mercy because we're good. We deserve it because we haven't stopped trying. We fall, but every time someone stands up again and says, 'We can do better,' even now, especially now, He clicked the device off and left the deck. The next morning he stood before the crew in the main briefing hall. He looked exhausted, worn, but not broken. "I've recorded our testimony," he said. "I'm submitting it at the appointed time. I didn't speak as a soldier. I didn't list our achievements or apologize for our failures. I just told the truth." Brooks raised a hand. "What if it's not enough?" Raiden met his eyes. "Then at least we didn't lie." An hour later, as the ship's chronometer hit the final hour, Raiden returned to the command deck and transmitted the file to the alien sphere. The moment it was sent, the ship powered down again. But this time, not in fear. It was like the monument reached out and held them, gently. No alarms, no threats, just stillness. Then came the voice, not spoken, not transmitted, just known. "Your kind is flawed, violent, driven by hunger for more." A cold pause followed. "But your capacity to change, your resistance to finality has been noted." The crew collectively held their breath. Judgment is postponed. Raiden didn't even realize he'd dropped to his knees until Jen helped him back up. "Postponed?" she asked. "Not forgiven?" Raiden shook his head, breathing shallow. "No," he said softly. "They didn't forgive us." Brooks leaned forward, brow furrowed. "Then what does it mean?" "It means they gave us another chance." The alien sphere dimmed, its glow fading into the vast dark of space until it simply winked out, vanishing like a dream forgotten upon waking. Systems returned, the engines hummed, the ship lived again. And Raiden Holt, standing amid the soft lights of the bridge, understood the truth. This wasn't the end of their judgment. It was the beginning. The days that followed were quiet, but not the kind of quiet that brought peace. It was the silence of aftermath, the breath right after the blade stops swinging, the stillness that comes when you realize you're not dead, but you might never be the same again. The alien sphere had vanished without a trace. No energy trail, no gravitational disturbance, as if it had never been there. But everyone on the Kestrel Dawn knew better. You don't forget being weighed by something that could erase your entire species with a blink. Captain Raiden Holt moved like a man carrying a weight no one else could see. The message had been delivered. Judgment postponed. Not absolved. Not escaped. It was the cosmic equivalent of being told, "We're watching you. Don't screw it up again." And now humanity had to live with that. Jen caught up with him on the lower engineering deck, where he'd taken to wandering lately, observing repair crews and offering quiet words to exhausted hands. She fell into step beside him without asking. "They're calling you a hero on the back channels," she said, her voice low. Raiden scoffed. "I gave a speech, that's not heroism." "You stood up when no one else did," she replied. "They needed a voice. You gave them one." He didn't answer. Not immediately. Then he said, "It won't be the last time we're called to answer." "You know that, right?" She nodded. "But maybe now we'll be ready." The next message from Earth Command confirmed his fears. The judgment wasn't isolated. Other alien monuments, different forms, same function, had appeared across known space. Some ships received the same evaluation under review. Others didn't come back at all. Humanity was being monitored, probed, not attacked, but examined, like a wild animal that might someday learn to be trusted. Or might not. "We've become a case study in restraint," Brooks said during one of the strategy meetings. One wrong move, and the verdict flips. Raiden stared at the digital star map of known space. Dozens of human colonies, mining operations, research outposts, even rogue ships. All vulnerable, all capable of ruining it with a single act of arrogance. "They won't give us a final warning," Raiden said quietly. "That was it. They gave us a mirror. Now they want to see what we do with the reflection." Jen pulled up a display, projected pathways showing the spread of humanity's expansion. So what's next? Slow down? Shut ourselves in? No, Raiden said. We keep exploring, but this time, we clean up after ourselves. The Kestrel Dawn was reassigned not long after. Its new mission: contact and aid. A roaming vessel tasked with patrolling the fringe worlds, offering assistance where it was needed, not conquest, helping colonies meet ecological standards, mediating conflicts, re-establishing treaties that had long been ignored. Raiden called it penance in motion. Some of the crew left, not out of fear, but because they didn't believe in second chances. They thought it was too late, that humanity had already failed. But others stayed, and new ones joined. Scientists, peacemakers, even a few former rebels who had once fought against the very system now trying to reform itself. Their first mission took them to a dying moon colony, where a corporate mining crew had poisoned the local water table and abandoned the site. The people left behind were sick, starving, and forgotten. Raiden stood before them, not as a savior, but as a man with something to prove. Not to the stars, but to the people who'd lost faith in anyone ever giving a damn. They delivered medicine, helped repair filtration units, offered evacuation for the worst cases. When one of the children, no older than 10, tugged on Raiden's sleeve and whispered, "Are you the captain who stopped the monsters?" He didn't know what to say. He just knelt down, looked her in the eyes, and said, "No. But I'm trying to make sure we don't become them again." Later, as the crew prepared to leave, Brooks leaned beside him and said, "You think they're still watching?" Raiden didn't need to look at the stars to answer. "Yes," he said. "But for the first time, I hope they are." The stars no longer looked the same. They hadn't moved. They still burned in their endless silence, scattered across the void like ancient prayers. But ever since the Kestrel Dawn stood in judgment, Captain Raiden Holt couldn't look at them without feeling watched. Not with fear, not anymore, but with the kind of reverence you feel standing in a place you almost didn't survive. A battlefield, a courtroom, a grave. The crew had changed too. They worked differently now, more aware, more intentional. Gone was the casual arrogance of deep space travelers who thought themselves the center of every map. In its place was a quiet humility, a sense that their steps through the galaxy left footprints someone else had to live with. Humanity hadn't been saved. It had been warned, and that warning had become a kind of purpose. Word of the Kestrel Dawn's mission spread across colonies, black market trade lanes, even old war zones. People began calling them the Watcher's Ship. Some mocked them. Others saw them as fools bowing to a higher power. But there were those, more and more each week, who listened. Other vessels followed their lead. Freighters rerouted shipments to avoid ecological damage. Colonial governors opened talks with displaced species their expansions had pushed out. Even Earth Command, begrudgingly at first, began revising frontier policies, sending out revised guidelines titled Directive Postponement Protocol. Raiden read every word of that document with a bitter smile. He knew it was politics, paper promises, but it was a start, and starts mattered. Their current mission brought them to a former research facility on the edge of Gliese 590b, a gas giant with magnetic storms that made comms nearly impossible. The facility had been abandoned for years, but reports had surfaced of a corporate unit returning to restart illegal experiments. Bioweapon tests on non-human species. Raiden didn't wait for confirmation from Earth. He deployed a response team immediately. They found the facility half-powered, its labs littered with stasis pods, some filled, some empty. The scientists protested, claimed ignorance, swore they were doing nothing but restoration work. But Jen's scans told the truth. One of the pods contained a sentient life form native to a moon in the Corlari system, listed extinct since 2179. Raiden stood in front of the pod, staring at the pale, unconscious being inside. It looked almost fragile, like glass carved into a living shape, and humanity had nearly killed it off. He gave the order. Shut it all down. Take everything. Free every specimen. Detain the scientists and send full logs to the Galactic Council, no matter the political fallout. Brooks approached him afterward, helmet still in hand. You're going to make some very powerful enemies, he said. Raiden nodded. Then I guess we're finally doing something right. They took the rescued life forms aboard, built containment units, set a course to return them to any habitat they might survive in, or at the very least, preserve their DNA with honor. No one cheered, no speeches, just silent determination. That night, in the solitude of the observation deck, Raiden sat alone again. He still carried the recorder. He hadn't used it since the judgment, but tonight, he clicked it on. I don't know if you're still watching, he said, voice low. But if you are, I hope you see what we're trying to do. He paused, gazing out at the deep stretch of stars. We can't undo what we've done. We can't erase the blood, the arrogance, the damage. But maybe we can balance it. Maybe we can show you that we're not just destroyers, that we learn, that we carry guilt, that we change. Another pause. I don't need you to approve of us. Just don't give up on us yet. He clicked the device off and stayed there a long time. And far above, in the endless dark, something shifted. A single faint shimmer passed across the stars, like a ripple of approval, or perhaps just acknowledgement. Nothing spoke. Nothing appeared. But for Raiden Holt and the crew of the Kestrel Dawn, it was enough. Because they understood now. Judgment wasn't a moment. It was a mirror. No one remembered the first strike. Maybe it was because Earth had been so quiet, too quiet, after the solar silence. Maybe it was because the galaxy had already written us off as a primitive species, broken by war, barely holding on under rusted satellites and polluted skies. We weren't part of the galactic conquered. We had no seats at the Alliance Tribunal. We didn't even get the courtesy of a formal declaration. The invasion just happened. They called themselves the Chiral Dominion, a race of scaled, silver-skinned warlords who'd swept through 36 systems in half a cycle. They didn't conquer planets. They erased them, turned oceans into dust bowls, skies into ash, populations into whispers. And Earth? We were their warm-up. The first wave wasn't even military. It was a terraforming sweep. Machines the size of mountains falling through the atmosphere, burning as they came, rewriting the air itself. Cities from Kyoto to Lagos vanished in flame. Whole countries blinked off the grid. Our governments fell apart within hours. Satellites melted in low orbit. Communications died. The galaxy watched from afar and shrugged. The humans were always going to fall. No proper planetary defense? Still running on combustion and bullets? What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that we weren't defenseless. Not anymore. We had kept something hidden, buried deep in the crust of the moon, far beneath the sea of tranquility. It was never meant to be revealed unless the Earth was on the edge of extinction. We called it Project Revenant. And it was angry when the atmosphere split open over old Nevada and the blackness filled with silver warships. That's when they finally got a response. Not from presidents or generals, not from global alliances or UN delegates, no. Our answer came from beneath the shadows of craters long forgotten. It started with a tremor, a low rumble in the soil. Then the ground cracked. And from deep beneath the moon's core, they rose. 12 massive dreadnoughts, blacker than the void, each one 1,000 meters long. Their surfaces shimmered with tech the galaxy had never seen. They didn't fly. They ripped space around them, each one powered by fusion cores fed by artificial singularities. Earth's orbit shuddered. The moon groaned, and the Kyril ships paused. It was the first time in their expansion campaign that they had stopped moving forward. Our dreadnoughts didn't send a hail. They didn't negotiate. They didn't explain. They erased the first Kyril fleet in under 7 seconds. There was no sound, no warning, just light, blinding and violent, followed by silence. One of their motherships tried to retreat. It bent space to fold away. It didn't make it. Because Dreadnought Orion, the lead of our Revenant fleet, unfolded a weapon not meant for this century. A graviton harpoon locked on the retreating vessel's warp signature and ripped it back into real space, collapsing the ship in on itself like crushed paper. That was the moment the galaxy stopped laughing. That was the moment the stars, once calm and unbothered, woke up. And they heard our voice for the first time in 100 years. "This is Earth. We're not just alive. We're coming." The Kyril High Command didn't understand what had happened. Their intelligence divisions, arrogant, bloated, used to dissecting primitive species, were silent for hours after the destruction of their forward fleet. When the report finally reached the Dominion's core world of Traskvar, the Arch-Warlord dismissed it as an anomaly. A sensor glitch. Faulty data. "No species from the outer spiral has that kind of firepower," he growled. But Earth wasn't part of the galaxy's story. Not for a long time. While they were building interstellar councils and trading routes, we were building something else. Revenge. Decades ago, after the silent collapse, the global blackout that almost ended our planet, we had stopped trying to play catch-up. No more diplomacy. No more exploration. Just survival. A united Earth, working underground, off the radar, off the maps. And it wasn't just technology we had developed. It was doctrine. The dreadnoughts were only the first act. Inside them were the Echo pilots, humans bred and trained for zero-latency interface with quantum core ships. People who no longer needed sleep, who fed through ports in their skin, who had once been human, but had transcended the flesh in pursuit of warfare perfection. They didn't speak much. They didn't have to. They were wired to kill, and each dreadnought held 10,000 drop capsules in its underbelly, containing soldiers unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. We called them reclaimers. They didn't ask for mercy. They weren't given orders. They had one directive: take back what was ours. On day 4 of the invasion, while the Dominion scrambled to understand how they lost a full fleet, Dreadnought Orion moved again, this time toward Mars, not because it was under attack, but because Mars had been our forge. The secret shipyard, the cloning stations, the deep-core AI caskets. Earth had built the dreadnoughts, but Mars had built the war. As Orion approached orbit, Martian Command activated the orbital spires. Blue rings of light crawled across the planet's equator, and from them rose a signal that reached every corner of the galaxy. "To all hostile forces, Earth is awake, run." It wasn't just for show. The message piggybacked on subspace relays, riding the same networks the Kyril used to coordinate their empire. Every world they had ever conquered heard our voice. Some laughed, most didn't. Because by the time that message hit the Dominion's outer colonies, our reclaimers had already hit the ground. Their first target, Nex 9, a mining colony once held by Earth before it was annexed during the resource seizures 50 years ago. It had been stripped of everything: metals, fuel, and its people. The Kyril turned it into a slave world. The reclaimers dropped in at night. No warnings, no lights, just thunder. They moved like ghosts, armored in adaptive exoskin, powered by fusion nerve fibers, with helmets that pulsed with red light every time a kill was confirmed. Within 20 minutes, the command structure of Nex 9 had fallen. Within an hour, the slaves were free. By dawn, the reclaimers had left, leaving behind only one message scorched into the surface. Property of Earth. Trespassers will be annihilated. Back in the Galactic Council, panic began to spread. Earth hadn't sent diplomats. Earth hadn't made demands. Earth didn't want a seat at the table. Earth wanted blood. And still, the Kyril underestimated us. They sent their second fleet, heavily armed, reinforced with elite sentries, and a battle barge the size of a moon. They thought this would end it, but we hadn't even begun. The Kyril's second fleet arrived in force. 70 capital ships, 400 escort vessels, swarms of automated kill drones fanning ahead like an armored tide. Their pride, their power, their arrogance, it all poured into that offensive. They were heading straight for Earth. The Dominion believed in overwhelming might. For centuries, that belief had served them well. Entire species had fallen before their hammer. Cultures erased, worlds glassed. Their mistake wasn't in underestimating Earth. It was in thinking we were like them. When the second fleet breached the edge of our solar system, they found nothing waiting. No dreadnoughts, no resistance, just the cold silence of deep space. Their sensors caught only the lingering energy trails from the first battle, the fading radiation from the Kyril fleet we'd vaporized. They assumed our remaining forces had fallen back to Earth to fortify the homeworld. Standard defensive logic. But Earth wasn't following logic. Earth was following rage. As the Dominion ships moved past the orbit of Neptune, the first of their destroyers vanished, without warning, without signal, without debris. Gone. Then another. And another. It took the Kyril 15 minutes to realize what was happening. We were cloaked, not just visually, dimensionally, a branch of physics they had declared impossible centuries ago. Earth had never declared it at all. We had just done it, in silence, with time, with loss, with anger. Dreadnought Leviathan had been waiting among the shadows of Neptune's rings, its hull bleeding artificial darkness. It launched a coordinated strike using phase-locked quantum torpedoes, weapons that didn't travel through space, but around it. The Kyril ships didn't explode. They folded, turned inside out by their own gravity wells, their own shields, their own arrogance. Still, the rest of the fleet pushed forward, panicked now, but committed. That was the Dominion's weakness. They didn't retreat. Honor-bound and blind. So we hit them harder. From Pluto's orbit came Dreadnought Cerberus, dragging behind it a weapon array the size of a small moon. It fired once, just once. The beam wasn't visible. There was no light, no explosion. Just a hole where 12 ships had been. A perfectly silent, spherical void in space that collapsed on itself moments later. The Dominion fleet began to break formation. Not retreating, scattering. But that was worse. Because that's when our reclaimers arrived. Not from Earth, not from Mars, from within the fleet. We had infiltrated them. You see, the Kyril liked to enslave. They took prisoners, laborers, test subjects. They took thousands from Earth in the early hours of the invasion and brought them aboard their capital ships to show dominance. They didn't realize those prisoners were assets. Reclaimers had let themselves be taken, implanted with internal nanolinks, hiding their signals, waiting for the command word, awaken. And when it came, the inside of the Dominion's prized battle barge turned into hell. Fires erupted in the hangars, gravity reversed in command decks. Hundreds of Kyril warriors died screaming as reclaimers emerged from cargo crates, vent ducts, and supply tunnels. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were weapons. Captain Varektal of the Dominion's lead vessel, the Korthan's Pride, activated an emergency beacon calling for support. It never broadcast. The beacon had been sabotaged an hour earlier. By then, it was too late. The dreadnoughts closed in. 6 of them, now uncloaked, their engines glowing like the hearts of suns, surrounding what was left of the once proud Second Fleet. Dreadnought Orion transmitted one final message to the remaining Kyril ships before the final volley. "You came to our home with fire. You called us savages. You named us broken. Now see what you've awakened." The dreadnoughts fired in perfect synchronization. Each beam, each torpedo, each pulse of destruction had been calculated weeks in advance by Earth's war AI, Demon, the sentient combat algorithm that had written its own language just to describe vengeance. In 62 seconds, the Second Fleet was gone. Every last ship, every last soldier. No survivors. And Earth was still silent. Not because we were weak, but because we were waiting for the Dominion's true response, because now they knew. We weren't the prey. We were the storm. News of the Second Fleet's destruction reached the Kyril Dominion like a poison in the blood. At first, the High Command didn't believe it. They accused their own intelligence divisions of treason. Then, as confirmation came from distant relays, they went quiet. No threats, no declarations, just silence. And that silence spoke louder than war. The galaxy noticed. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Kyril Dominion had suffered a total loss, not just defeated, erased. Their enemies across the stars rejoiced quietly in back rooms and encrypted channels. Species they'd once enslaved dared to hope. But hope was fragile. The Dominion still had the First Fleet, their oldest, most powerful, most sacred armada. And they would not let the humiliation stand. The arch-warlord himself, Vorotan the Eternal Flame, stepped onto the command deck of the Eclipse Spire, the flagship of the First Fleet. Towering over 10 feet tall, clad in black-plated armor forged from the bones of extinct stars, he was no politician. He was war incarnate. He had never lost a battle, never issued a retreat. His scars were older than Earth's modern civilization. Vorotan didn't speak when he saw the report. He just nodded once and said, "Burn them." The First Fleet launched within hours, 1,000 warships, 20 planetary siege engines, and a vessel known only as the Null Hammer, which hadn't been seen since the extermination of the Varnu species a century ago. The Kyril weren't coming to conquer now. They were coming to erase Earth from existence. Back on Earth, we watched them come. Not with fear, but with calculation. Demon, Earth's war AI, had already seen it coming. For the past 6 years, it had been preparing a scenario called HFY Protocol, a last resort plan designed not just to protect Earth, but to make the Kyril regret ever leaving their stars. HFY wasn't just about weapons. It was about psychology. We didn't have 1,000 ships. We had 12 dreadnoughts. But we had something the Dominion had never needed to develop: desperation. While the First Fleet sailed toward our solar system, our world didn't panic. Cities remained calm. Civilians went underground. Our systems lit up. Automated defense grids that had never been tested came online. And then we did something the Kyril never expected. We sent them a gift. A single reclaimer, Private Talia Wren, launched alone in a stealth drop pod, carrying with her a sealed cube no bigger than a loaf of bread. The Kyril intercepted her over the edge of the Vega expanse, pulled her aboard, interrogated her, tortured her. She never spoke, not a word. But the cube she carried, it opened on its own, and it showed them. Not threats, not propaganda, memories. Everything the Kyril had done to Earth fed directly into their neural systems. The screams, the fire, the children burning in the streets of São Paulo, the cities turned to shadows, the humans enslaved, dissected, crushed. They saw it all, as if they had lived it. And some of them broke. Warriors, officers, elites. Their minds buckled under the raw brutality of what they'd inflicted, now turned back on them with human eyes. That was step one. Step two came when their ships began to glitch. Not damage, corruption. Demon had hidden code inside the cube. It laced itself into their systems during playback. Subtle at first, then violent. By the time the first fleet entered Neptune's orbit, they had already lost control of 5 destroyers. Their gravity drives began to misfire. Navigation twisted. Fire control turned inward, and Earth's dreadnoughts hadn't even fired yet. Then, on the dark side of Jupiter, a hidden gate opened. We called it the Rift. It wasn't a weapon, it was a mirror, a quantum echo gate, built by Demon from reverse-engineered alien tech buried under Antarctica. It didn't just reflect light or energy, it reflected war. When the Kyril fired the null hammer toward Earth, the Rift swallowed it and spat it back, straight into the heart of the First Fleet. The resulting explosion tore a hole through the void. Dozens of ships were obliterated instantly. Others drifted powerless as Demon flooded their systems with recursive code loops. We didn't just fight them, we made them afraid. And still, Earth remained silent. Because we knew one thing, the Kyril weren't done. Not yet. The Arch-Warlord had survived, and he was coming. Vorotan stood at the edge of his ruined bridge, the carcass of his once glorious fleet scattered across the black sea of space. Debris drifted by in slow, lifeless spirals, chunks of alloy, flickering power cores, bodies. His second heart pulsed louder in his chest. The null hammer was gone. The Eclipse spire was crippled, and his warriors, those who had pledged blood and galaxy to his name, were either vaporized or mumbling into corners, minds shattered by human warfare that defied every law of reason. Yet the Arch-Warlord didn't waver. He didn't rage. He didn't scream. He simply whispered, "So, they are worthy." A half-dead tactician coughed behind him. Should we retreat, my warlord?" Vorotan turned slowly. "You still speak of retreat? I see now why your bloodline never claimed a throne." He tore the tactician's throat open with one clawed hand. Let the corpse slump against the shattered wall. There would be no retreat. Vorotan had been alive for 9 centuries. He had survived black holes, neural plagues, and soul-melting weapons built by gods. He had watched his enemies prey before being burned alive. He had fed infants to his beasts, and smiled when their cries echoed through his iron halls. But he had never been challenged. Until Earth. And that awakened something in him. He left the wreckage of his bridge and climbed into the final chamber, deep beneath the Eclipse spire. A place forbidden even to his own people. There, in the silence, stood the prime weapon. A living core, pulsing like a heart wrapped in chains. It was older than his empire. Something stolen from the ruins of a dead civilization before the Dominion had even named itself. It was never meant to be used. But now, Earth had earned it. He placed his palm against the core. It screamed. The warlord smiled. Back on Earth, Demon detected the activation of an unknown signal, a ripple so deep it passed through real space and into quantum strata. It wasn't just a message, it was a call to death. Demon processed millions of scenarios. None ended cleanly. Humanity had won every battle so far. But if the prime weapon was real, if the warlord had activated something ancient, something cosmic, then all logic became irrelevant. Demon did something it had never done before. It asked for help. Across the globe, human leadership gathered, what was left of them. Not governments, not presidents, scientists, engineers, generals who'd lost everything and kept fighting anyway. The people who had built the dreadnoughts. The ones who remembered the black skies. The ones who'd seen loved ones fall when the first invasion came. Demon spoke through 1,000 speakers at once. He has awakened it, We have less than 40 hours before he arrives. We require full authorization to enact Omega." A long silence. Then a single voice replied, "Do it." And Omega began. On the far side of the moon, hidden beneath what the galaxy assumed were old mining stations, the Omega Vault opened. Inside were weapons not meant to exist, prototypes banned by human ethics councils, bioengines that fed on fear, nanite swarms keyed to brain patterns, black hole bombs. But most importantly, it held one person, Commander Elias Caney. He had been cryo-sealed 30 years earlier after the siege of Cairo, when he led a suicide mission that should have killed him. Instead, he came back changed. His blood had merged with early nanoconstructs. His brain formed direct, permanent links with combat AIs. He didn't age. He didn't sleep. He wasn't human anymore. Not exactly. He was Earth's last contingency. When they woke him, he didn't ask what year it was. He just looked at the nearest screen, saw the warlord's face on a Dominion transmission, and grinned. "About time someone gave me a challenge." Demon uploaded directly into his mind. He didn't flinch. Within hours, Elias was aboard Dreadnought Nemesis, the only Revenant ship never used in battle. It was designed for one purpose only: to kill gods. With its activation, the human fleet reformed. What remained of our 12 dreadnoughts now followed Caney's lead. The stars shifted, gravity bent, and through the void, Earth broadcast one final message. Not to negotiate, not to threaten, just one word: come. And the warlord did. He came through fire. Vorotan didn't arrive with a fleet. That would have been mercy. He came aboard a single ship, a monstrosity the size of a small planet, blacker than shadow, pulsing with ancient energy that didn't belong to any known science. It didn't move through space. It devoured it, folding and dragging the void behind it like a cloak of oblivion. The Sorrow Engine. It wasn't a battleship. It was a curse, a remnant from the time before time, built by a species that had vanished from existence so thoroughly, even their atoms were forgotten. Vorotan had found it buried in a dead system, and spent centuries feeding it blood, bodies, and stars, until it obeyed only him. Now it moved toward Earth, slow, inevitable, like death itself. Dreadnought Nemesis watched from the dark. Commander Elias Caney stood in the nerve chamber, suspended in mid-air, lines of neural data crawling over his skin like electric veins. His pupils had long since vanished, replaced by a constantly shifting star map. Every heartbeat synced with Nemesis. He no longer needed commands. He was the ship. Demon's voice whispered in his mind, crisp and cold. "His presence bends space. We cannot match it through brute force." Caney replied without speaking. "Then we'll break his mind instead." The other dreadnoughts spread out, forming a web across the inner solar system. Not to engage, to stall. Every second they bought was another algorithm, another calibration, another fragment of understanding uploaded to Caney's mind. And Vorotan just kept coming. When the Sorrow Engine reached the orbit of Mars, it spoke. Not with words, with pressure. A wave of psychic distortion that shattered half of the Martian defense grid, liquefied the brains of unshielded personnel, and sent thousands into screaming madness. The Reclaimers didn't break. They held. Even when the Sorrow Engine began rewriting physics in its path, turning light into solid matter, freezing time pockets, causing gravity to pulse like a heartbeat, Earth's forces held formation. Because they weren't trying to win, they were trying to learn. And Caney was learning fast. He moved Nemesis between dimensions now, blinking through micro-realities, tracking the impossibility that was Vorotan's ship. Every encounter added to his understanding. Every attack deepened his map of the warlord's mind, because Caney didn't want to destroy the Sorrow Engine. He wanted to get inside it, and Demon was building him the key. Back on Earth, the Omega Vault spun down. All reserves had been emptied. The planet had given everything, every last innovation, every last secret to Caney, humanity's final gamble. And the galaxy watched, paralyzed. Because if Earth failed, there would be nothing left between Vorotan and the rest of them. No alliances, no borders, no laws, just fire and silence. When Caney finally struck, it wasn't with missiles or lasers, it was with himself. He launched Nemesis directly into the path of the Sorrow engine, shattering every law of space. The ship screamed, tearing itself into 1,000 layers of time, bleeding echoes of itself across the stars. And then, it phased. Into the belly of the beast. Inside, it was not a ship. It was a nightmare. The walls were made of memories. Screams echoed in frequencies the human brain shouldn't have been able to process. Dead civilizations whispered from the metal. Time did not move forward. It spiraled. Caney drifted through it all, untouched, his mind wrapped in Demon's code, his nerves running with liquid fire. At the core, he found Vorotan. Not on a throne, not in armor, floating, glowing. More energy than flesh now, his body infused with the engine, his eyes burning with stars that had long died. "You dare bring your infection here?" the warlord said. Caney didn't answer. He reached forward and touched the core. Demon surged through Kane's body like a virus through glass. The engine reacted violently, shrieking in frequencies that shattered even the void around it. Vorotan screamed, not in rage, but in fear, because he realized what Caney had become. Not man, not machine, retribution. Outside, the Sorrow engine convulsed, tore, exploded from the inside out, and for a moment the stars blinked. When the light faded, Nemesis was gone. Vorotan was gone. And in their place, floating silently above Earth, was a single, small beacon, broadcasting on every channel. Earth remains. The galaxy didn't know how to respond. For days after the fall of the Sorrow engine, the stars were silent. Not the quiet of peace, but the stunned, trembling kind. The hush after a monster is slain, and everyone realizes they had bet on the wrong side. For the first time in living memory, the Kyril Dominion was leaderless. Vorotan, the eternal flame, the warlord of 1,000 genocides, the butcher of moons, was gone. Not captured, not defeated, erased. And it was humans who did it. The shockwaves tore through every major galactic power. Treaties collapsed. Markets plunged. Even the Alaran High Chorus, a race known for their emotionless logic, declared an immediate withdrawal of all diplomatic ties to the Kyril. No species wanted to be caught standing beside a fallen god. One by one, Dominion territories began to riot. The slave worlds rose first, then the outer colonies, then the fringe militaries, confused and disillusioned. Without Vorotan's iron voice to bind them, their empire began to devour itself. And Earth? Earth watched, but not from a throne, not with banners or parades. We didn't celebrate, because the price had been too high. The dreadnoughts limped back to Earth's orbit, hulls scorched, systems flickering. Out of the original 12, only 5 remained intact. 2 more were unsalvageable. 3 were just missing, lost in whatever dimensional storm the Sorrow engine had unleashed in its final scream. And Commander Elias Caney? Gone. No body, no signal, no trace. Some said he died inside the engine, torn apart atom by atom. Others whispered that he had become something else entirely, a shadow in the code of Demon, a digital ghost watching from behind the stars. No one knew. Demon refused to speak about him. When asked, it simply replied, "He succeeded." Earth's surface was scarred but alive. Cities that had once been dark now flickered with rebuilding efforts. Underground vaults opened, releasing families who had been hiding for months. Children stepped into sunlight with cautious eyes. Soldiers returned home, some missing limbs, others missing more than that. Pieces of their soul carved out by what they had seen. No medals were handed out, no speeches given. Instead, Earth mourned in silence and prepared, because victory didn't mean safety. The fall of the Kirill had left a power vacuum, and the galaxy was already shifting. Former enemies were now potential threats. Old allies eyed Earth with wary curiosity, no longer sure whether to fear or admire us. The Galactic Concord sent an emissary, an ancient, snail-like being named Vos Kelir, draped in ceremonial robes of light. It arrived in a ship of peace, bearing words of unity. Its message was clear. Earth, we invite you to join the conquered. A seat at the High Tribunal is yours. Your power is respected. But Earth didn't answer, because Earth was changing. In the ruins of Geneva, where the UN once stood, a new voice emerged. Director Hannah Monroe, once an engineer, now the most powerful woman on the planet. She had survived the first invasion, helped build the Revenant fleet, and held the line when the dreadnoughts burned across the stars. She stood atop the black marble steps of the Reclaimer Citadel and broadcast a message across all frequencies. No music, no flag, just her voice. We don't want your seats. We don't need your approval. Earth bled alone. We rebuilt alone. Now we watch. And if the stars turn their eyes to us again with conquest in their hearts, let them remember, we buried gods, and we are not done digging graves. It was the shortest message in galactic history to be labeled a declaration of deterrence. And it worked. The galaxy backed off. No one wanted to test Earth's resolve again. Still, in the dark corners of space, old threats stirred. Broken Kirill warbands gathered like wolves in the void. Pirate fleets scrambled to seize abandoned Dominion tech. And somewhere, beyond known charts, strange signals pulsed. Faint, cold, not chiral. Demon watched them all. Earth had no intention of conquering the stars, but we would never be caught sleeping again. And deep beneath the Pacific Trench, in a chamber locked by 17 levels of failsafe code, Project Revenant 2 began development. Larger dreadnoughts, smarter AIs, a new kind of reclaimer, because while the galaxy rested, Earth was sharpening its teeth. Years passed. The stars moved on, but Earth never forgot. What the galaxy called the Dreadnought War became a myth in most corners of the spiral. To some, Earth was a cautionary tale. Primitive apes who struck back too hard. To others, a symbol of terrifying evolution, a species that had crawled out of the dirt only to stand toe-to-toe with a god and win. But for Earth, it was neither legend nor pride. It was a wound, and wounds don't heal easily. Project Revenant 2 grew in silence. Not in secret. Earth made no effort to hide anymore. But in the shadows, deep beneath the oceans, and across the asteroid mines of the belt. Kaney's sacrifice had changed more than the war. It had changed humanity. We no longer saw ourselves as fragile, vulnerable, the weak voice at the edge of the galaxy begging to be left alone. We were something else now. The dreadnoughts weren't just ships. They were warnings. They patrolled the system like sentinels, their silhouettes always visible from the surface of Earth. Children grew up watching their lights blink across the sky, not with fear, but with understanding. That the stars weren't a promise. They were a threat. And Earth would never be caught unprepared again. Demon remained operational, though it rarely spoke. Some believed it had gone dormant. Others thought it mourned Elias Caney, that somewhere in its endless algorithms, a ghost still lingered, part human, part code, watching from between heartbeats in the data stream. But when a signal appeared, just once, and just for a moment, from the outer edges of the Orion fringe, Demon noticed. It wasn't Kirill. It wasn't conquered. It wasn't even any known language, just a pulse. 3 short bursts, a pause, then one long tone, Old Morse code. Hello? The Council of Earth convened that same hour. What had replaced governments wasn't a democracy or a dictatorship. It was something new, born of necessity and shaped by war. Scientists, soldiers, and survivors made up the council now, people who had seen death up close and understood what real leadership looked like. Director Hannah Monroe chaired the meeting. She stared at the repeating signal, arms folded, expression unreadable. "Where is it from?" she asked. Demon answered, its voice quieter than before. "Unknown sector. 91 light-years. A system previously marked as lifeless." "Is it human?" another council member asked. Demon hesitated. "It matches Kaney's neural code." The room fell silent. Monroe's voice was soft. "You're saying he's alive?" "Not exactly, but something like him is calling." The debate was short. There was no argument. Earth would send one ship, not a fleet, not an army, just one, to answer. It was named Eulogy, the 13th dreadnought, born from the ashes of the First War and infused with technology that blurred the line between steel and soul. Where Nemesis had been wrath, Eulogy was memory. It launched silently, with no fanfare. Only one person piloted it, Commander Lyra Wren, daughter of Private Talia Wren, the reclaimer who had once delivered Earth's warning to the Dominion. She didn't speak to the cameras, didn't record a farewell. She just whispered to the ship as it powered up, "Let's go find the ghost!" And the stars opened once more. Beyond the Orion fringe, past collapsed wormholes and radiation scars left from ancient wars, Eulogy followed the signal. Weeks passed, then months, then a flicker, a crack in the black, a space that wasn't space. Inside it, a single ship drifted. Not alien, not entirely human. A hybrid. Its hull was stitched together with pieces of Nemesis. Its core pulsed with Kaney's signature. But what was stranger still was the face that appeared on Eulogy's interface. Not Demon, not Kaney, something between. "You found me," it said. Lyra stared at it. "Are you Elias?" A pause, then a sad smile. "I was. Then I was war. Now I am. What comes after?" She felt the chill in her spine. Not fear. Something deeper. Reverence. Eulogy scanned the ship and found something unexpected. A message stored in quantum layers, meant only for Earth, buried in Kaney's neural imprint. It played once, low and slow. "The galaxy is older than we think. The Kirill were just pawns. There's something coming. I've seen it. Tell Earth to build faster." Lyra's hands trembled. "What's coming?" she asked. The signal smiled one last time. "Not death, not war. Judgment." Then the signal vanished, and the ship drifted away. Lyra returned to Earth with the message. The stars above were peaceful, but the Council knew better now, and so did every soul on Earth. We weren't defending a planet anymore. We were preparing a species, because if judgment was coming, Earth would meet it with dreadnoughts and fire, and the memory of gods we had already killed. Humanity remained, and it remembered.